This morning on The Real Story, Uber and Lyft drivers are at the tip of our fingers, but will the state step up to protect them? Rallying for better pay and better working conditions. We're talking about rideshare rights. But first, we're speaking with the head of the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities system as they ask for a slice of the state's surplus pie amid a strict spending cap. Why Chancellor Terrence Cheng says more funding is an emergency. He joins us next on The Real Story. Good morning and thanks for joining us here on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wulfhorst. With the session officially underway and Governor Ned Lamont already signing legislation, we're off to the races. What's bound to be the story of the session, a tense budget battle, and Connecticut's colleges and universities say they need more. Chancellor of CSCU, Terrence Cheng, is here with us now to talk about it all. Terrence, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, starting off, for those who don't know, what is the CSCU system here in the state?
The Connecticut State Colleges and Universities system is 17 campuses, 6 institutions across the entire state. We serve over 80,000 students. We're very proud of the fact that we serve the students that, frankly, wouldn't have a chance to access higher education without a system like ours. And we have an $11 billion economic impact across the entire state. We train the teachers, we train the manufacturers, the professionals, the nurses and healthcare folks that really populate the state and drive the workforce and the economy.
A lot of campuses, a lot of students there. So when this reorganization first happened, and since then, legislators and experts have all questioned if centralization really equals a better system. How do you see CSCU working here in Connecticut?
So we have examples nationally where systems have incredible impact, whether it's in New York or California, Texas. There are great examples of how a great higher education system really drives workforce development, it drives the economy, and it partners with industry. And that's exactly what we are doing now. I'll speak first about the community college merger. The consolidation of the community colleges has created more access, more opportunity, and more fluidity. It's taken down barriers for our students, and it's allowing them to do even more. And we believe that the system is in a very good position to advance its causes and help the state at an even higher level.
And so one way we've seen, certainly being a big advocate for campuses here at the Capitol, but also CSCU has set up a number of ways to streamline applications, including automatic admissions programs and pipelines. Tell me a little bit more about some of those new options opening up for students in the state.
The most important one is the auto admit program. So with that program, students from Connecticut high schools can literally fill out one application and be accepted to multiple institutions within the CSCU system and a few of our privates. And we have seen incredible success there. In the first year, we had about 1,600 applicants, and this year we have almost doubled that number. And so that just means that more and more Connecticut students coming out of high school are going to go right into college and then from there into the workforce.
And so nationally, though, we have seen enrollment tank in colleges and universities. What have we seen at CSCU, across those 17 different campuses? What have enrollment and admissions looked like?
Sure. So I'm happy to tell you that our enrollment this spring, when we compare it to where we were last spring, we're actually up.
Okay.
So we're up by a few points, which is a really good thing, and it's one of the first increases we've seen in a few years. Of course, because of the demographic cliff that is facing many parts of our country, we've experienced challenges, there's no doubt about it, but we're working very hard to bring enrollment back, to reach different populations, so that ultimately we're serving as many Connecticut residents as possible.
And so like many other groups across the state, you've come to the table again this legislative session asking for a piece of the state surplus, looking for more funding. Tell me first how much CSCU is asking for and why.
Sure. So let me start with the fiscal year 2025 deficit that we had been projecting, which is a $140 million deficit. And through the incredible sacrifice and hard work of our institutions across the state, we have been able to mitigate that budget deficit by over $100 million. And that is through hard work, it's through determination, it's through sacrifice of our people. So we're coming to the state now asking for $47.6 million that would allow us the runway we need to continue to stabilize and streamline operations and find the balance we need to serve the state while continuing to evolve into a 21st century organization.
And so that budget deficit, that funding gap that you're speaking about, $140 million, colleges, like many other industries, received temporary pandemic-era federal funding during, when COVID-19 was at its peak during the pandemic, but that's now run out, that's gone, it was temporary. The state has said before that they can't keep up with filling that temporary funding gap, and they want to transition colleges and universities, not just CSCU, but also UConn system, to what they say is more sustainable funding. What's been your response to that?
So I think we need to reframe how those funds from the federal government were utilized. COVID was a black swan event. And without the support from the federal government and how we were supported by the state, so many of our institutions would have had to shutter, and so many thousands of people would have been without jobs, and students wouldn't have been served. And so when we look at the history of how our budget has been funded as a system for several years, our budget has been balanced through the use of one-time funding, but it happens to have recurred year over year, even before COVID. And so when COVID struck, we were forced to use those funds to continue to fund the operations of our institutions and our campuses, and that really is how we utilize it, because without that, we would have had even deeper, even darker problems.
You said the system utilizing one-time funding even prior to the pandemic for the past several years. So does that mean that CSCU and colleges and universities in the state have been needing more funding from the state government even prior to 2020?
That's our position. That's absolutely right. Because when we look at the needs of our institutions, when we look at the rising healthcare costs, when we look at how certain things are calculated by the state, or frankly, responsibilities that are signed onto by the state that we must shoulder those burdens, the costs of our operations continue to go up. And so we're very thankful to our legislators and our state leaders for the support that they've given us, but we think that the argument is clear that more funding is required.
You mentioned previously some deep cuts needed to close $100 million of that $140 million gap.
That's correct.
What did it take? Can you tell me a little bit more specifically about what had to happen at CSCU to cover that $100 million?
Absolutely. So tens of millions of dollars were in reductions that were in the staff. So our part-time employees, many of them were non-reappointed. And those are folks that are actually serving critical needs. They're helping with student advisement. They're helping with student services. They're helping with mental health counseling. They have library hours open using our part-time employees in many cases. And so those reductions have been very painful, and it's hard for us to continue to provide those services when we have those kinds of reductions. We're doing the best that we can. Unfortunately, we were also forced, because of this situation, to raise tuition. It's something that none of us wanted to do at the administrative level, at the board level, but we only have so many levers that we can really pull to try to close a budget gap of this size, and we have to do everything possible.
And so if, quickly looking into the future, if CSCU doesn't get that entire $47 million that you're asking from the state, what would happen? What would need to be done in the system?
We'd need to make even more reductions. We would have to reduce our services even more. We would have to non-reappoint even more individuals. And that means that our students are going to suffer. Our students are not going to have the support that they need. In many cases, they will not have the courses that they need to continue in their academic journeys. This will slow down their graduation. This will slow down their ability to get into the workforce. And so reductions across the board would have to be enacted, and it would really hurt our students and our communities.
Could that mean possible tuition hikes as well for students?
Unfortunately, we can't take that option off the table.
Right. So would one-time funding, though, be enough? You mentioned that prior to the federal American Rescue Plan Act money during the pandemic, CSU was also receiving other forms of one-time funding. You're asking now for money, the $47 million this session, as emergency funding, but
Correct.
Will one-time funding be enough? Are you looking as well for maybe a restructuring of the way the state funds colleges and universities?
We would argue that a conversation such as developing a new funding model would be really important to our future, because we can't keep going year to year and trying to plan for the long term for the betterment of our students and for the state. And so it's absolutely a conversation that we would like to have, but we want to work within the biennium budget structure, and so we want to be very thoughtful and planful about how we approach those conversations.
And so with that budget structure that you just brought up, it's really been about fiscal guardrails for both the governor and a majority of lawmakers at the state capitol. They're really sticking to that spending plan as they look at budget adjustments this session. But this past week, we did see already a bill approved by lawmakers and signed by the governor to allocate $17 million for home heating assistance for people in the state. Now, that money is coming from leftover American Rescue Plan Act funding that the state had. So that's kind of outside of the, this overall budget structure. The state has $56 million, now $39 million, because they just spent 17, left over of this ARPA money that they have to spend by the end of the year. Is that a pool that you would consider looking at? Is that part of conversation with lawmakers? Because I know you've told me you've already spoken with legislators about this.
We've been very clear with our legislators what our ask is and what it would be used for, and we don't begrudge the work that our legislators and our state leaders have to do. It's hard, obviously, to put together a state budget with so many very important needs that are out there serving so many people.
Absolutely.
So clearly, we just want to advocate for ourselves and make it clear that the impact that the CSCU system and all of its institutions have is a very worthy investment that has an incredible return and is a really felt impact across the entire state.
And is that what you would want them to know? How are you communicating with them the way you want higher education prioritized at the Capitol this session?
Of course, we've been very clear that we believe we are an instrumental part of the state. We are a girder of the workforce. We are a girder in so many communities and industries. And we just try to tell our story with clarity, with integrity and honesty, show them the data, show them the statistics of our impact, and just give them what they need to make the very challenging decisions that they have in front of them. But we think that we're worth every dollar that is invested and that there's a clear return on that.
So we've spoken with other lawmakers even before the 2024 session started last week about higher education and education as a whole in the state. And lawmakers have spoken a lot about supporting colleges to help increase enrollment as well as increase kind of the next thing in terms of programs and innovation at our state colleges and universities. So looking to, both the near and the far future for CSCU, what does that look like? What is happening right now in terms of frontiers or new initiatives for CSCU?
I can't give our faculty and staff enough credit, because even during incredibly challenging times, they remain at the front. They are innovative, they're pushing, they're striving, they're researching, they're advancing scholarship. So 2 areas that I think are key. Number one is healthcare. Healthcare is here, it's now, and it will be the future. And so we're looking to launch LPN programs at our community colleges and across several campuses. And we have very promising work happening in the space of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we have programs that are being developed right now that are going to have an immediate impact both on folks who are already in the industry, folks who are looking to enter the industry, and the companies that are obviously utilizing that emerging technology.
Right. Well, Chancellor Cheng, thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you so much for your time.
Well, there's still more to come, though, on The Real Story. Rideshare drivers are rallying for state intervention in wages and working conditions this legislative session. We're talking to drivers about their reality and what they hope can change. That's ahead. Stay with us.